I am 17 years old, and I am sleeping on a snowbank in a makeshift snow shelter that I made in New York City Central Park. It is Christmas time, and I am homeless. And every expectation of normalcy for a 17-year-old was completely gone. But here's the part that took me 30 years to understand. It wasn't losing everything that night. It was what took place over the next 30 years. It was something that I began to drink. And I drank that down every day for that next 30 years. I didn't grow up with nothing. I had loving and adoring grandparents who were nurturing and caring for us. I had a father who adored his family. I had a mother, but she was very disconnected, and I never had a real close relationship with her. But my father, I did. But he also had to fight his own battles. He was dealing with his own demons, as he came from a household of 2 raging alcoholics. And his father especially was assaultive physically and abusive and assaultive emotionally. Then, when I was 9, my father got sick. He was diagnosed with cancer. And then for the next 2 years, he was in a fight for his own life. He would ultimately lose that battle and died when I was very young. My mother, who was never strong for the family, was basically adrift, and it was mostly my aunts who were helping out the family. My mother met a man about a year later and then remarried about a year after that. That person only had an interest in the family with her and was not interested in myself or my 2 siblings. The family quickly dissolved and disintegrated in front of my eyes. And I took from that a bill that life was unfair and it was unjust, and I didn't get a fair shake. And the truth is, there's facts to that, and there is actual truth. Life isn't fair for anyone. And in my case, these were the cards that I was dealt with and the circumstances. I started to drink from a cup. And no, not alcohol right away, but we will definitely get into that in a moment. I was drinking from a cup of resentment, that poisonous, treacherous cup. Why me? This isn't fair. Why did this happen? How come I'm not getting a fair shake in life? And so on. But you see, what I thought I was drinking, it was justice. And it wasn't. It really was pure poison. Through my early years, I carried that cup daily, and I would drink from that cup every single day. I would look at the world around me, and I was fighting for survival, but also to fit in and strive. I worked really hard in a corporate environment and busted my ass to make something of myself. And in fact, became one of the youngest general managers in that organization at the age of 24. But I continued to drink from that cup, that poisonous, treacherous cup that was nothing but resentment. And every day I looked around me and I could find the cues and the triggers that would set me off internally, never externally. What I was doing externally to deal with that turmoil in here is I turned to alcohol. And in my early 20s, I struggled with that because that became my tool and how to deal with that cup, that poisonous cup. So outside of just drinking the resentment and that poison, I added the alcohol to it. And that continued on with me through my 20s. You see, what I want you to understand is that that cup represented something more significant than just the alcohol. That poisonous cup that was filled with that insidious cocktail we call resentment. And every single turn of my life was built on looking at a lens through the shadow of that cup as I drank it every single day. And as I was continuing to drink through that, and that anger would build, and it was building in here, my soul became a very dark place. And as a result of all of that internal turmoil, I truly felt that I would never go any further. In fact, I didn't think I would live past 30. Even though I was proving myself over and over again to be successful, that cup that I drank from continually poisoned my soul. And when I finally was able to learn by a group of people that came into my life that I didn't have to drink that cup anymore. First, the alcohol, I could put that down. And the second was I didn't have to drink that bitter poison cup of resentment. That I could start to look inwards of the things that I did have and who I was and who I was becoming, and the potential within myself, something that I lacked for so long, understanding, even though I had shown myself over and over again the capacity to have success after success, I literally couldn't see that inside because I was so fixated on that world around me and what everyone else had and their gifts and opportunities, and truly dealing with that bill that I had to pay, which was that resentment of life is just not fair. And when I finally reflected internally, this is where my life truly began to change. So here's what I want you to understand. Resentment is truly an emotional response filled with anger and betrayal, really, about life and us. It is something that is significant because it isn't necessarily an inherited gift. In fact, I would argue resentment is more of a social construct because we're taught very early on to see that others could have more than us. But I digress from the real point here. It really is about how we see our world, and that bitterness that you may be experiencing, that I know I had, I always thought that it was because of them and this and the unfair life. I never once could look internally. The truth is, if you are dealing with resentments, you really are not a bitter person. You are not a bitter man. You are not a bad person. You don't know that this is something that may legitimately be very true. You may have had a horrific story that is your background, and you're continuing to drink from that cup. And as you do, the world is still seen by that clouded lens and that distortion that we continued to drink when we were just consuming from that cup of bitterness, of that resentment. That is how we see the world. What I would also like to share with you is that it's okay to know that life isn't fair. And it's okay to know that, hey, some people just don't get the right shake in life. I can go back and look at my father, died at 37 years old, and he fought so hard and he had such a hard life. And I can count many fathers like my father, and mothers and other people, siblings, friends, so on, that all came from that place, that all had things taken away from them because life isn't fair. The fact that I'm here and able to talk with you today shows just exactly how fair life can be when we fight for the things that we believe in ourselves and we work on this first instead of worrying about what is out here. So I want you to know that I stopped drinking from that cup years ago. But here's something that I would like to also express, is that from time to time, when I do grab an empty cup, I can find remnants of that still in there. And even in my second half of life, the second journey, as a man, I can say I will still look at the world somewhat through that lens from time to time and see that clouded distortion of, hey, how do they get that? Why are they so lucky? Or why do they have that kind of support? Or all these stories. It is very infrequent, but I'm here to tell you that it still is something that can creep up into your life. And for me, after 3 decades, I can tell you that it's learning how to recognize and check it and put it in balance today that is truly the success that allows me to not be consumed and eaten alive by that. So a couple of things. First, if you find yourself with that window of resentment showing up in your life, understand it and catch it. Look at it. Think about it. Catch yourself and say, did I really just think that? Did I just look across the street at my neighbors and their parents came in with this and gave the kids a brand new Jeep or whatever it may be, and did that sit inside of me for some poisonous moment? Catching it is the first step. Once we can look through that window and we recognize that we have that, again, 3 decades, and I'm still from time to time catching myself with that. The second part to this, and I think is the most important, is that we have to turn into our own inventory. Who we are in here, the things that we do have, the capabilities, the competencies, the people we've had in our lives. If you're a man and you're in the second half of your life, which is what this channel is all about here at Silver Warrior's Journey, then you can identify that there's been many things, even when life was at its hardest, that you can take away and say today that I had those gifts. I had this inventory is actually, there's a lot of things in there that are good, that are positive, that were successful. And every one of us has levels of this in our lives. It's the matter of turning inwards to look at it and to identify it. And then the third piece to this is to choose humility. And I can go into a narrative on what humility is, but I think the greatest and most simplest definition that I've ever learned came from a man named Wayne Dwyer. And he put it this way: humility is not thinking less of ourselves, but it is thinking of ourselves less. And as you can grasp that for a minute, I mean, think about that for a minute. That sets into the soul. And it isn't a belittling of our own, who we are and our own strifes and challenges and successes, but looking outside at the world. And that's a really powerful lesson. I hope that that hit with you, as when I first heard it, it was significant for me. I can also say that from a personal experience, that having resentment throughout the rest of your life is going to be a death sentence. We all die, we all go, we don't get out of this alive. But what I mean by that is I knew a person, and I'm not going to explain how and who this person is, but right up to his deathbed had resentments about the world around him. And most of it was irrational, but still had it, and never could come to terms with it. And right up to his deathbed, and I remember seeing him in his deathbed and having a conversation, and he looked at me for the first time. He had a sense of vulnerability and almost a sense of humility. And he said, "I'm dying." And I told him, I said, "I know, and we're here for you." And there was a sense of probably closure for him, and not really understanding that he could have worked his way psychologically out of that by looking inwards to all the things that he did have in his life throughout his journey. But sadly, as I said, he literally took that to his deathbed. And many people, without resolving this now, will continue to do those same things. And I'm asking you, please look in, check in that window and see if you are dealing with this same issue. If you're drinking from that cup still and you have that resentment in you. So in summary, really, gratitude and humility are the two foundations, the two pillars on which our freedom relies. It really relies completely on it and lies directly on them. To have that in your life is to remove that poisonous insidious cup of resentment. My name is Bernie Tiger, and I have spent over 3 decades working with men who have had similar stories to mine and did not know what to call it. And they worked right alongside of me for all those years and were able to finally come to terms and figure out their own stuff, what was going on with them. If you'd like to have that opportunity to work with men just like the men I'm talking about and people like myself, please see the link in the description below for my opportunity to work with me on a one-on-one basis. In addition, I also have a group called the Tiger's Den, and it is part of the Silver Warriors Journey Access Group. It is a free group to join if you are still here. 2 things. 1, I would ask please subscribe to the channel so that you can keep in touch with me. I'd love to hear from you. Please feel also free completely to leave a comment. I respond to all. And the second is, again, if you are still here right up to this moment, then you are truly a Silver Warrior. And I am very honored to have the opportunity to spend this time during your journey together. And I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video.